Your story idea works on paper, but readers still don't feel it. The missing piece is tying that idea to your protagonist's inner arc and core theme so the stakes hit home. In this video, I'll show you the overlooked fix to make that connection, turning a solid novel premise into a story readers care about. You've already done the hard part by analyzing the initial draft of your guiding premise to make sure your story idea holds up. Now, we're taking it one step further and refining the premise itself to use as a guide for your novel. Because the real secret to a novel readers care about isn't just a strong idea, but what actually makes that idea worth reading. So, we're going to find that thing. We're going to find out what's really driving this story, tie that to your protagonist's arc, and thread that into your premise so the deeper layer of stakes come through too. That way, you'll see how that emotional layer will not only make readers care, but it gives you a clear lodestone for every decision you make while writing or revising too. Grab your initial premise from this video and your validation notes, which I demonstrated in this video. And we'll do that right now. Okay, so you are going to pay attention to any of those validation notes to refine your premise too. But first, we want to make sure that you can take them into consideration all together with this deeper layer piece. So keep that premise draft in front of you. But before you start fiddling with your premise, do a little thoughtful reflection to identify your story's core theme. Ask yourself, is the character in this premise experiencing a struggle that's parallel to one that's important to highlight and needs more representation or visibility in the world? Does it reflect something I've personally struggled with? Or is the situation one I need to explore? If your premise grew out of an interest, hobby, or real life experience or history, that might be a good place to check if there's something deeper striking a chord with you. Make some notes on what you find out or pause to do some reflective journaling to understand what it was about this idea specifically that drew you to it. We'll use that in the next part of this step. Let me pause for a second to let you know that I can send you these steps straight to your inbox so you can better follow along. Just click the link in the description to get my free novel premise mini course. Now, how might you take what, after a lot of soul searching and honesty with yourself, you realized your answer is, and say something about it? Or from another angle, how has this story idea come out of something you were subconsciously trying to say with this book? What is the burning truth behind it that you want people to know or understand? What message are you trying to tell? Brainstorm and journal or write it all down. I know. You're not trying to write a preachy, didactic novel, and that's not what your readers want either. But even if you're going into drafting or revising with the intent to publish something that entertains people, ask this: can readers be entertained if they don't care about the story in the first place? I'd say novels can and should do multiple things for readers to have the most impact. In fact, that's where my three keys to reader enchantment framework comes from in the first place. These keys are born from the brain science of what readers want out of stories. The key of expectations relates to how the reader's brain seeks familiar structures, genre conventions, and pacing. This is how you entertain them by setting and fulfilling promises that deliver excitement and satisfaction. The key of experience is the visceral, immersive part of reading, which gives readers a sense of escape. When readers engage with your characters, their brains activate mirror neurons as if they were performing the actions or feeling the emotions themselves. This means your story is processed by the brain as a lived experience. The key of enlightenment is the bridge between these two, and it's the key that addresses your deepest why. The very thing we're layering into your story's premise right now. This key unlocks knowledge for readers and allows them to learn this from the story vicariously. You are searching for your story's central purpose, what I call the ley line. When you clarify your ley line, you clarify the core truth or message you want to convey. This thematic core directs everything in your novel and gives it meaning. Stories are essentially a simulation space for social and emotional problem solving. Readers turn to fiction, even the most fantastical kind, because they want to learn how a character overcomes the tough stuff so they can gain insight into how they can too. When a story contains a meaningful core, a clear ley line, it engages the reader's default mode network, or DMN, the part of the brain involved in extracting meaning, reflecting on themes, and integrating story lessons into their own self concept. This is how fiction works its magic. Readers care about your character because they care about themselves and others empathetically. When they enter the story through the character's perspective, they experience it vicariously. The brain immediately pulls on the reader's own emotional memories to process the fictional events. This neural activity creates personal investment and attachment. Without that emotional core, that ley line to anchor the plot, your novel risks becoming merely a whole bunch of things that happen without lasting impact, becoming quickly forgettable, even if the action is exciting. By intentionally weaving your core truth, your ley line, into your premise, and therefore the story it guides, you ensure your story has the substance needed to sustain a whole novel. This is the power source that ensures your story delivers meaning through your characters, thereby making readers truly care. Why not create a story that's not only entertaining, but also carries a deeper impact, whether it's light and whimsical or dark and intense? That deeper, often subconscious reason you feel compelled to write this story is the same reason readers will care about it too. For example, if I dig into my reasons for writing Rose's story idea from the earlier videos, I realize it's not just about dragons and war, although that's the seed that started it. I was craving a really good dragon riding novel. But by examining why I craved that kind of story, I realized it was really about the close connections through magical bonds and perhaps the thrill of flying and feeling alive, especially while getting older. So now I ask myself, what am I really trying to say about those things? And my reflection brought me to the idea of what defines really living and what it means to keep living when loss has taken away the things that once defined life for you. That idea became the deeper truth I wanted the story to explore. Is it better to risk love and lose again, or to stay safe and stop truly living? And my answer was then something like, it's better to risk love and lose again than not to love and therefore not truly live. That's the ley line of this story. It's emotional power source. And you know what? It's not represented as well as it could be in the stakes of my initial premise draft. So let's move on to the next step of mapping that core power source to your own protagonist's arc. So take your idea, the subject your story is exploring. and take what you're trying to say about that subject and write it for your protagonist. For my example, that's turning it's better to risk love and lose again than not to love and therefore not truly live into Rose needs to learn it's better to risk love and lose again than not to love and therefore not truly live. For a more detailed breakdown of defining your story's leyline theme and how that shapes your protagonist's arc, I encourage you to grab my spellbook outline template. It'll help you structure that arc, and the supporting materials will walk you through the leyline process further too. It's linked in the description below. Okay, so now you can finally bring this fix into your premise. Have your initial premise draft in front of you to refine it and thread in your ley line. Review your premise validation notes, and your defined ley line truth or theme. Then it's likely going to take some trial and error fiddling to synthesize those changes in a revision. It's important to remember, though, that perfection isn't actually possible, and it's not what you need to revise your premise for. It's a guiding premise that simply needs to be tight enough and clear enough to serve as a trusty reference for you as you work on your story. It's going to keep your decision fatigue and the story itself in check for delivering on its most core promises. I do want you to be able to make it able to be understood by whoever says to you, "Oh, you're a writer? What's your story about?" Might as well make it dual purpose if you're going to the trouble of writing and revising it anyway, right? Plus, if it gets your acquaintance excited and immediately invested and doesn't make their eyes glaze over, then you know it's likely something you can use to stay excited and invested for the length of a novel sized project, too. So let's get your premise as good as it needs to be to do its job. I'll demonstrate with my own example. Here was my initial premise draft. After the loss of her husband, Callus Rose is put in command in a dragon riding battalion during an enemy invasion. But if Rose can't acknowledge her feelings, she'll doom her own heart and the officer and dragon she never admitted she loved. And in validating it, I found the weakest link between the external conflict and stakes. I didn't actually state Rose's own goal, nor did I have much of a clue present about what that link between fighting the enemy and Rose's own feelings was. From the leyline work, I have a clearer sense of the importance of living after loss. Yes, I already had that she is callous and won't acknowledge her feelings, but it's harder to see how that's driving the external conflict or where the idea of living life comes in. The timeline isn't clear for that either, so it might sound like Rose just buried her husband yesterday. It wouldn't sound so great to expect her to move on with life immediately, and that makes the leyline lesson she needs to learn seem more cringe than powerful. So, taking that all together, I can start fixing my premise for these priority things. One, I want to establish Rose's goals somehow. The good news is, I bet I can do that while bringing in my leyline theme of how she wants to feel alive. Two, I can fix the timeline clarity so that leyline resonates. Three, I can better connect how Rose's not yet transformed beliefs about keeping her heart safe by not opening it to the pain of loss impacts the greater external stakes of war. I'll tackle that first thing. Instead of Callus Rose is put in command in a dragon riding battalion during an enemy invasion, which is a little weak in construction and doesn't connect it to much meaning, I could say she reluctantly accepts command during an enemy invasion just to stay in the sky and outrun her grief. Now, there are some whys behind it. It gives her goal and connects it to her leyline truth she needs to learn by the end. The second priority could be as simple as changing the opening phrase from after the loss of her husband to something like long haunted by her husband's death. Now that sounds like this isn't a fresh grave, at least. And lastly, the part that probably took me half a dozen iterations of different wording to wrestle into something concise and clear enough. I tried to better connect the war stakes, Rose's goal, and her internal stakes. So my second sentence was, but if Rose can't acknowledge her feelings, she'll doom her own heart and the officer and dragon she never admitted she loved. I still needed that general idea that she needs to connect to dragon and officer love interest for something that has real external stakes in the war, but clearer. So I beat it around a while, trying different ideas such as saving them before they fall to the enemy or the like. But it wasn't quite connecting it all in the way I wanted until I realized back from my early leyline work about wanting a story about dragon bonds that I needed to bring that idea in more fully. I landed on but if she keeps running from every bond, especially with her dragon and the officer who could help turn the war's tide, she'll lose both her home and her chance to truly live again. A little clunky, yet probably. I do so like my M dashes, but it connects the pieces this time to give it better drive from Rose's goal and what she's trying to protect. I am still really tempted to add yet more M dashes to include something like her chance to truly live and love again. But I can probably trust that it's already inherent in the concept of running from bonds after the death of her husband. So I'll spare you this time. That means my refined premise is now long haunted by her husband's death. Dragon Rider Rose reluctantly accepts command during an enemy invasion just to stay in the sky and outrun her grief. But if she keeps running from every bond, especially with her dragon and the officer who could help turn the war's tide, she'll lose both her home and her chance to truly live again. Not perfect, of course, but does it do what I need it to? At this point, I might return to the validation steps to further test this new version. Make sure it's promising all the right things, and if needed, refine it further so it gives me a solid guide for moving forward with this story. So that's what you can do too to refine your premise into one that has more oomph behind it, to give readers something they can care about. But the real test comes next when you use this premise to see whether your story can deliver on that promise. Because now your stronger premise acts as more than a guide. It can also be a mirror to show you what's really on the page and what's still missing. Next, I'll show you how to use your premise as a tool to take your story from idea to published book. Let's make your story's premise the foundation for the novel readers won't easily forget when you go to this video on your screen.